Welcome to 28.5 Women's Basketball, where we explore a unique and authentic perspective on the women's game, break down upcoming matchups, and discuss the latest news and trends in women's basketball. We are your hosts. I'm Sydney Story, and I played basketball at the University of Tennessee under Pat Summitt.
And I'm Becca Goodman, and I played at the University of Notre Dame under Muffet McGraw. And we're thrilled to have you join us today. Before we jump in, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoy what you hear, be sure to tune in each week and don't forget to follow, download, and listen to give an assist and share the love. Now let's get started with today's episode.
Becca, how's it going?
Hey, Sid. It's good. It's been a busy week, that's for sure. How are you?
I'm doing well. It has been a busy week, and we are almost at tourney time. I mean, the real tourney, March Madness, conference championships are done and dusted, and now we're headed to the big dance coming up here.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And this year has just flown by, but there's been so many good games, and the conference tournaments did not disappoint. I think it just adds to the madness of what March is, and definitely excited to talk about today's episode and then get into the tournament once we get seeds out.
Yeah, can you believe this is our 31st episode?
No,
No,
I can't. I really can't.
We started the season and we're like, yeah, we'll see how it goes. We'll do maybe one episode a week. We ended up there was a stretch where we were doing 2 episodes pretty much every week. We've kind of back to 1 here, but man, we kicked them out. There was so much juice this entire season. We just tried to do it justice. I think that's it.
Yeah. I think when it was in the peak of us doing 2 episodes a week, it was because there were so many upsets. And for us to talk about it, it was something that women's basketball isn't known for. We're not known for that. And then it just kind of kept going. And it was like, well, this is the standard now. Just great freaking basketball.
Such a good season. I am so excited for March Madness here. It's going to be an intense few weeks as the tournament kicks off. But before that, we are going to highlight a few fun things in today's episode. So we have a first half for you. We're going to do 2 halves and an overtime. So in the first half, we are going to highlight those conference championships. Our second half, we are going to preview our projected 1 and 2 seeds and kind of walk through where those tournament projections are coming in and where we think teams might fall. Obviously, Selection Sunday is upon us, and that's really going to dictate what these seedings are. But it's fun to kind of predict them, and some of them I think are a little bit predictable after the conference tournaments here, but we'll see. And then we have an overtime, which is our in the news section. So should be a fun episode ahead.
Let's get rolling and jump into those conference tourneys. The first one that we're going to dig into a bit more is the Big Ten. I don't think it was a shocker to anyone that UCLA and USC was in the finals of this game. I think it's definitely news and noteworthy in the fact that they're both new to the conference. They played in Indy. I think that was an amazing atmosphere to have that type of caliber of teams really battle. This is the second time these teams faced each other within just over a week. But the difference of this one is, and everybody always says this, it's really, really hard to beat a team 3 times. It's really, really hard to beat a team 4 times, right? Anything from 3 on, I think it's like you're flipping a coin at this point. Or you might as well just go the other route because you know each other so well, and maybe you get a little bit, you downshift a bit. If you're the team that's won twice, you assume it's going to happen, and that other team is just gnawing and fighting and grinding. So in this Big Ten championship game, UCLA beat USC for the first time this season, avenging their 2 only losses, which were to USC, but they ended up winning 72-67. Sid, what'd you think of this one?
How cool is it that you have 2 of the best teams in the country that are from the same city? I just think that's so unique in and of itself. And then, as you mentioned, USC had UCLA's number in the regular season, and for UCLA to turn around and beat them in the conference championship was so cool for UCLA. I thought that the game was fun to watch, but you could kind of tell that UCLA had the edge for a lot of the game. And for them to turn around and beat the likes of Juju Watkins and Kiki Ariafin and some of those girls that are playing really well down the stretch here, kudos to UCLA. I think they really bounced back. They took the punch a couple times, bounced back, and really showed why Kiki Rice, Lauren Betts, all these girls get all this hype because man, are they good. I think UCLA could really make a deep tournament run here if they play like they did in that conference championship.
Without a doubt. I think this was just a ton of fun to have these two giants of programs play in Indy, play in the Big Ten final, and for UCLA to get that win. Let's jump over to the SEC, where we had South Carolina was able to beat Texas by a pretty convincing score, 64-45. Now this is a team, this is the third time these two fought as well, right? South Carolina won the first time, Texas won the second, and then they went down to the wire to be a coin flip to who got the 1 seed, with South Carolina overwhelmingly beating them. And I just think with these types of teams, and specifically these two conferences, the Big Ten and the SEC, if you take a minute off, if you take a play off, if you don't get a stop that leads to a back-to-back stop, the whole game just can get away from you. And we've really seen that with some of these teams throughout the season, whether it's Maryland or Texas or Notre Dame even, right? NC State at times. It's really, you're flipped on and you're ready for it every possession, or it goes off and on, and then you're really battling to get back in the game. But overall, the SEC champs, South Carolina, bounced back from some of their losses, specifically that nasty one that they had against UConn, to really take it home here. Sid, what'd you think about this one?
I think South Carolina, when they play like that, they're in a league of their own. Like, there's been a few teams this year that they have just flat out blown out when you're thinking it should be a good game. And to see it happen this late in the season is just scary for anyone that has to play South Carolina in the tournament. And you look at Falasia Milwali, Chloe Kitts, some of these girls had really good SEC tournaments.
Yeah.
They were consistent.
Chloe Kitts was amazing.
Amazing. I mean, she's gotten so much better over the course of the year. She was good coming in. I mean, she was one of those players from the very beginning that you and I highlighted a ton. And to see her get even better throughout the season, scary for whoever has to play South Carolina.
Couldn't agree more. I think Chloe Kitts understanding her role and just being held to that higher expectation. Maybe early on in the beginning, she was a bit resistant of it. I think she knew she had to come into that role, and Dawn really held her to that standard. We saw her, having to handle things off the court, kind of taking a game or two off, getting things, in line. But I would agree with you completely. Her tourney was nuts. She played really well. All right, jumping over to the ACC tourney. Now, this one is rough, rightfully so. Duke beat Notre Dame to get to the final game. It would have been a nice Notre Dame NC State rematch from the 2 overtime thriller where Notre Dame lost. But props to Duke. They absolutely showed up consistently on both ends of the floor against Notre Dame. And Notre Dame was just off. I don't know what's going on. We'll probably dig into that a little bit later. But Duke really showed up. NC State played and came. And again, the vibe of NC State early on was high expectations, kind of underperformed, and now they're back. Like this crew and this team, they're all buying in. The guards are understanding their role. They're showing up consistently game after game. But I will just highlight, Duke beat NC State 76-62. I don't think if anyone told us that a 26-7 Duke would be winning the ACC championship, that any of us would have believed them. Sid, what'd you think about it?
Yeah, no way. I'm with you. We like to dog their offense.
I know.
Bit, but we talk about how good their defense is from day one. From one of the very first times we saw Duke, we were like, whoa, this separates them a little bit. And now that they're putting some offense behind it, and we've talked about Toby Fournier. She was highly touted coming in, one of the best freshmen in the country, and she's really stepped up in ACC play, conference play. And then Reagan Richardson's one of my favorite players to watch for Duke. I think she's also good. She kind of plays with her heart on her sleeve a little bit. Like, you can see her emotion on her face a lot, and she's just so into it, and you can tell she's so passionate about it, and she's a really good guard. I just think Duke is peaking at the right time. We talk about that all the time. They were able to come back and avenge all the losses they had in the ACC the past week, right, to come back and win this thing. And when they beat Notre Dame on Saturday, I'm thinking to myself, they could do this, which was kind of crazy because, as you mentioned, we would have not picked Duke to win the ACC championship.
No, for sure not. Also want to shout out Ashland Jackson for Duke. She's a junior. She had 22 points in this game, but she's definitely somebody who was the voice of the team. They highlighted her often, and she'd be rallying the troops in a huddle, kind of repeating Coach Lawson's message within and on the court. So they highlighted her just in a stance of the voice of the team to get them going. And I just think she played really well as well. But again, shocked they were there, and I'm even just more shocked they beat NC State. I really am. Think about the road that Duke had to get to that final game, right? They were a higher seed, so they played like every day. And I just think the three conferences that we've talked about so far, the Big Ten, SEC, and ACC, the quarterfinal games were insane. Like IU almost upset, not really. I mean, it was close, but IU almost beat USC. Like these games were like battles to the finale here. They were almost more enjoyable to watch than the championship, which is when you just have a good field of play here. I just give these tourneys were just so enjoyable to watch in the way that you felt like it was March, because it is, right? But
it is. There it is. I think this is exciting for the ACC also, because heading into the tournament, for me, it was Notre Dame and NC State that were Elite Eight contenders. And if Duke plays the way they did the past few games, they could make an Elite Eight. I'm not necessarily saying they're going to make the Final Four. Like that's a whole nother step there. Mm-hmm. But they're a bigger contender, I think, than we thought, which is exciting for the ACC to have another team that's in play there.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Let's jump over to two conferences that maybe we don't really touch base on a lot. The first one being the Big East. UConn's kind of running the gun over there. They have it on lock. They haven't lost a game in conference yet. They were undefeated in conference and then also obviously won the tournament. So they end up beating Creighton 70-50. So a nice 20-point lead there. Nothing to really bat an eye about. Props to Creighton. I don't know the last time that they were in a tourney final, but I also just want to highlight UConn as a whole, right? Their record is decent, right? 31-3. But as we've talked about in many situations, they've played people, but not like a ton. The one marquee win that they have is against South Carolina, when candidly South Carolina played like poop. Like they just did. They just did not. I don't even know how to say it. They just didn't show up for that game, to where I think the women's basketball world was like, whoa, I can't believe South Carolina's not showing up, because we were just so used to that. So props to them for catching them on a chin one good night. But their other losses are to Notre Dame, Tennessee, and USC. So they haven't really beaten any of those top 5 teams other than South Carolina. And I know people are going to say, but they beat South Carolina. They did. You get that for sure. But I just think it was on an off night, and the Big East and their schedule as a whole hasn't been that tough. But don't get me wrong. They're playing well. They're taking care of business. They haven't had any of those mess up games where they get a loss they're not supposed to, period. So I think they're also starting to peak at the right time. I'm going to be interested to see how the tournament handles UConn, or how UConn handles the tournament, just because it's a bit of a, once you get to that Sweet 16, those games are all do or die. They all are anyway, but the competition, it goes up a notch.
Yeah, I think that's maybe where we see UConn struggle, is when they get to that Elite Eight picture. Like I think, depending on where they end up in the bracket, I think they can win that Sweet 16 game. We'll see. You got to play, but it's the Elite Eight game that might give them some trouble to get into that Final Four. I think Gino obviously brings all that experience. He's going to put that game plan together, and we'll see what UConn can do. But it's interesting, to your point, they don't play as tough of a regular season within their conference. And does that hurt them when you've got the SEC and the Big Ten and the ACC even really playing in much tougher conferences? That's an interesting one. And does UConn get to capitalize on that a little bit? And they're probably going to get a 2 seed. We'll see where they end up seated. I mean, it might play to their favor a little bit because they're not getting beat up as much. Who knows?
Yeah. It'll be interesting. It always is. Jumping to our last conference to highlight is the Big 12. TCU was able to squeak by Baylor, a Baylor Bears team, which is really kind of coming into a good stride here. They're not talked about a lot, but they've had so many close games that for them to get to the championship of the Big 12 and then play TCU so close, props, right? TCU experienced team, Haley Van Lith, Sedona Prince, a lot of weapons there. But TCU was able to hold off Baylor 64-59.
Yeah, it's fun to see Haley Van Lith and Sedona Prince take care of business there. I'm very excited to watch them in the tournament. This would be a fun team that does well down the stretch. And I think you can't sleep on them.
No.
By any means. And Notre Dame learned that one, right?
I was just going to say, no, we cannot. No one can.
Yeah, exactly.
we learned that.
All right, let's jump into our second half here. We're going to preview projected number 1 and 2 seeds. So a lot of this we found on ESPN. Let's jump in. Projected number 1 seeds, not in any particular order here, because God knows what this order is going to look like.
Yeah, I agree.
South Carolina, UCLA, USC, and Texas. What do you think about those 4, Becca, as number 1 seeds?
I think they're warranted without a doubt. I don't see how South Carolina's not a 1 seed. I don't. Obviously, I'm full in on UCLA and USC. I think those two have made their mark. They've made the impact. They're only battling one another at this point. So, absolutely. I think Texas is interesting just because I feel like they've had some bad losses. The Maryland game, I just think back to these. There was a couple games where there was so much hype around this game, whether it was South Carolina, Texas, or Maryland, Texas. And it just it under-delivered so bad. And I know some of these, it's hard to be on every night. I understand that. Trust me, I was a part of that. It's impossible. But the bad shooting, the bad loss by 20 plus, that's where it gets a little tricky to me. And then for them to fall in, not be the number 1 overseed, and then to fall to South Carolina, where it's kind of been a battle between those two, that's where I can kind of see it's one or the other. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on it.
I agree. I think Texas is the weaker of the 4. I mean, we'll see how it all shapes out, but based on body of work and what's happened throughout the season, I totally agree with that. I think looking at it, to me, if I had to pick the number 1 overall seed, I think I'm going with South Carolina.
Really?
I think so. I think they're capable of beating all of these teams by 20 if they want to. And that's crazy.
Yeah.
Now,
that's crazy.
That's crazy, but they have against a few of these teams, right? They just did it against Texas.
Right.
They lost to UCLA, right? So some would argue that UCLA should get that number 1 seed overall over South Carolina. And I get that argument. But if South Carolina is bringing their A game, and if they can consistently do that, I just think they're so deep.
Yeah.
They're the deepest.
Oh, without a doubt. I think UCLA is rightfully the overall number 1. The only loss that they've had is to the same team. So they've handled business in a holiday tournament, and you know what I mean? They're not getting distracted. It's one team that knows them inside and out at this point. No joke. And then they were able to avenge that to win conference when it was the most important. That was the most important win, and they got it. I just think UCLA is that overall number 1. But how nuts is it that we're even talking about this? It would always be oh yeah, UConn's the number 1. South Carolina, that's it. It's just who it is. Don't even talk about it. It's just known. I think it's amazing and it's awesome. And it's even crazier when you get to the number 2 seeds.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it. So projected number 2 seeds, and again, in no order here, UConn, NC State, TCU, and Notre Dame. Thoughts on those 4?
Yeah. I guess that works. That's what it is, right? I don't have any uproar about it. I don't know anyone else that would rightfully be a 2 seed that would, I can't believe we're missing so-and-so. LSU is one that possibly could be in consideration there. Them also getting upset in the SEC tournament, that didn't help their cause. And they all talked about the fact that people will be back and nobody's injured. I think Notre Dame is rightfully a 2, unfortunately. They absolutely needed to win the ACC championship, and they didn't. So, yeah, I think those all make sense to me.
I think so, too. I don't think that they're missing anyone there, really. Which maybe that is a pointer that after these top 8, it kind of falls off a little bit. right?
Mhm.
That's an interesting thing a
Yeah.
little bit there. We've kind of talked about that, how there's been kind of the top 10-ish all year, and then there's kind of everyone else. So that's
Yep.
an interesting one. I don't think Duke did enough to get a number 2 seed,
Yeah.
even though they won the ACC tournament. They just had too many
7
losses.
losses, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of a big deal there. So that might be one of those Cinderellas that performs better than their seed if they continue to play the way they're playing. But I think Notre Dame, to me, maybe one of the bigger disappointments here, because if you would have
Mhm.
asked us, gosh, 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, would have been like, oh, Notre Dame takes care of business here. They're going to be a number 1 seed hands down. And they kind of fell
Yeah.
short a little bit. So
And
yeah, I think
and
it makes sense.
and that is exactly what is terrifying to me. With you're on a high, you have an amazing win streak rolling, and it's stay focused, pay attention to the last couple, and maybe that's I don't know what we'll probably get to that in a little bit here, but
Yeah, let's
I
go
don't
there now. Let's go there now. I think it's good.
We're there.
Let's do it.
We're there now. We have teleported to this. Yeah, so just talking about ND, it's, after winning 19 games in a row, they lost 3 of their last 5. Like that's insane to me. And all of them are ACC games, all of them. The ones I think that really set them up for the conference tournament, right? They had a nice win against Louisville, but at the time Louisville's trying to figure themselves out. They've had some good games, don't get me wrong, but Notre Dame played their last home game. It was, they were on a high after just losing 2 of them at home, NC State and then or away, and then Florida. I just think we got to get it together. Like, period. That's all I can say. The inconsistency, especially at the end of season, is scary. It's you're do or die now. I think it was really rough to see post game of their loss to Duke, where it was Niele, Sonia, and Liza. We did not have Olivia or Hannah. And it doesn't matter who they pick. It does to some degree, right? But I just think Sonia and Liza aren't really. Sonia's an X factor in what she can do when she gets the ball and she's in a good position and you feed her and she can impact the game, but she's not handling the ball.
Here's a throwback for you. Sonia is like the Alicia Ratai in the 2001 Notre Dame National Championship.
Yes.
You remember she was a 3-point shooter?
Yes.
And she kind of rounded out the guards for him. And
Completely
that's the team that
agree.
Niele played on. I mean, she's the Alicia Ratai. That's a throwback for those Notre Dame fans.
That's a great one. I 1,000% agree. I don't know. I just wanted Hannah or Liv also up there in that press conference answering these questions as to what happened. They talked a lot about they're frustrated. Niele's mentioned she's frustrated. And both girls were like, we got to get it together. We got to focus in. And a lot of it was on their defensive end. And we had a huddle where we brought in Melissa Lewis, where we talked about, are we concerned with their half-court offense? And everything was feeding and like, no, because as long as they play defense, they get out and they go. They don't need a half-court if they're playing defense. The games that they've lost, they have not consistently played defense. They've not consistently blocked out. They've not consistently taken care of the ball. It's so one-on-one stagnant. And it's concerning. I will say that they got to get their stuff back together because it's do or die time now. And maybe that's where this is all going. Maybe that's where this is, they're using this to fuel their conversations as everyone thinks we're out now. So now's the time where we rally. So I freaking hope so, because it's been last couple games have for sure been rough and has looked like a different team.
Yeah, I think when Notre Dame is on, and if they play like they can play when they're on, they dance their way to the Final Four. Like, nobody's stopping them. If Miles and Hidalgo and Citron and Westbell and Leah King and all these girls are bringing it, like we've seen against some of the good teams early in the season there. I know Westbell was injured at that point. Notre Dame makes it to the Final Four. But if we see glimpses of what we've seen in like the last week or so, somebody's going to have their number. And that's a disappointment to me because I think Notre Dame is one of the best teams in the country. Like, on paper,
crazy is it that we beat UConn, USC, Texas when we didn't even have a bench? We didn't have Maddie or Liza. It was literally they played 6 players. I just think it's a real shame that we're not peaking, and we've talked about this, but like seriously, we're not peaking at the right time, and it's kind of causing you to backtrack and say, whoa, crap, like how do we get this train back on track? What do we need to do? And honestly, it's the basics. Take care of the ball, block out rebound, and play defense.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think defensively they need to bring it a little bit more, and they're very capable of it. We've seen it. I also thought during the game on Saturday against Duke that Hidalgo was taking a lot of the shots.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to throw that out there. A lot of the times that works for them because she's one of the best guards in the country. So she's one of the best guards to have done it. I'm not throwing smoke at her at all. But if other folks aren't involved, it's kind of a one-sided thing. You're easier to scout a little bit. You can maybe say, hey, let's let her have her points. And, maybe Notre Dame scores 60 and we're going to try to score 70. Like, I think more people need to be involved in the offense. She went 9 for 22 in the game where your post players only had a combined, and I'd have to look at it again. I was looking at it on Saturday. They had a combined 8 or 9 shot attempts.
Yep,
so
that's right.
To me, you're not getting your starting post players involved like they need to be. Like a Maddie Westbelt, Leah Two-King, who are really good post players. Get them touches. The second you're getting them touches and you have to focus your attention to them from a defensive side, it opens up your guards. That's just basketball 101. And I think because that's not happening, and it's great that Hidalgo gets all these steals and can get transition layups off of them. Don't turn that down. Don't stop that. But if you're not going to get your post involved, it's going to be harder for her to get looks. And I thought she looked a little pressed at times as opposed to turning to let's get everyone else involved and share the ball a little bit. I think that's when Notre Dame is dangerous.
Yeah, I 1,000% agree with you. And I think when it goes kind of one-on-one, everybody else watches. Everyone else gets stagnant. And that's where, like, the Princeton offense, you played with what the read was, and it didn't matter who it was. If you had that mismatch or you made that read and that person was open, it was whoever was in that position, they were open. This is very much like Liv and Hannah dribbling to create, and then people get caught on their heels because they're not expecting it because they don't expect it, right? So like for Hannah to go 9 of 22, your next highest percentage shooters only got 9 shot attempts, and that was Miles and Citron, which rightfully they should be. But normally we're used to seeing at least like 18 to 19 for 2 people. This was very much Hannah, and she's amazing. Don't get me, we're not knocking
for sure
one individual player by any means. She does more than I could do, but it's just making sure the rhythm and the pulse of the team is still beating appropriately. And I think that is what makes you successful. And at any point, she can lock up, play defense, and go get a steal for a layup at any point if she wanted to. So it's just picking and choosing those and remembering your principles of, especially on the defensive end.
Maybe this is the kick in the teeth Notre Dame needed, and they're going to turn it around and play Notre Dame ball for the rest of the season because they should make a Final Four. That's the thing here.
I hope this is a good kick in the teeth, and then we win the ship, and everything's happy day, and we don't even think about these losses. That's how you want it, right? That's how we're going to write it.
There it is. All right, so let's jump back a little bit and talk about some other noteworthy shifts after championship conference week here. So Baylor, we talked about them a little bit. They had lost to TCU in the Big 12 championship. Baylor made arguably the biggest move of any team during champ week. We'll call the conference tournament champ week here. So they made that biggest move. And they, by doing what they did, by making that Big 12 conference championship there, they are moving into the top 16 by reaching that championship game. So that's a huge thing for them, right? They get to host. And it's just like those signature wins they needed throughout that conference tournament to get there and to kind of put them over the edge. And I think that's huge for Baylor.
And I think this has the momentum of being an upset story, right? They're playing well. They've tasted success. They held close with TCU. I mean, it was on the ropes for a while. A 5-point win was a lot closer. And who knows, now that they're able to host, that momentum you never know what you're capable of doing once you get the taste of it. So eyes are on Baylor to see if they can upset some folks for sure.
Yeah, we'll see. That's going to be a fun team to watch there. And then on the flip side, Tennessee, Alabama, Kansas State all cost themselves opportunity to host the first and second round of the NCAA tournament games by losing before their conference semifinals. It was very disappointing to see the Lady Vols, obviously from my end, right, to see the Lady Vols lose to Vanderbilt again, and this time in the SEC tournament. Was a bummer to see that, but Tennessee did lose to Vanderbilt, and that's the reality. Shea Ralph had her number this year, so we dropped back. We're not even hosting. That's a huge bummer for us. Alabama, we've talked about on and off throughout the season, a good team.
Yep.
But again, if you don't close out these regular season conferences and the regular season tournament like you should, this could really hurt you. And we see that with Tennessee, Alabama, and Kansas State.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, Alabama's had some nice upsets, right? They beat LSU at Bama with a couple of their girls out going into overtime. So they had all the writing was on the wall for them to kind of come in, be one of those, maybe like a 7-8 seed, 6-7-8 seed, and just kind of coast, right? Like have a nice run at it, host and stuff, but absolutely sad to see them go down. Same with Kansas State. I know Kansas State has had injuries. One of their best players tore her ACL. Finally kind of bouncing back from that, kind of getting more specific people stepping up, but sad to see them also bow out here.
Shout out to Christy Curry, one of the best recruiting coaches in the game.
Completely
agree. Can do it at Alabama there in the tournament. So now all those three teams, they drop to 5 seeds, right? So that really hurts them, as we mentioned. But that leaves the door open for the Baylor Bears and the Ohio State Buckeyes, both of which are now projected to be 4 seeds in the NCAA tournament. So they gain from this a little bit, despite them getting blown out in the Big Ten semifinals. So you saw Ohio State get blown out by UCLA in the semifinals, and then the Buckeyes did enough by beating Iowa in the quarterfinals. So that's kind of how they're able to jump ahead in seeding there. And man, I go back to the Lady Vols. It's just such a bummer. I'm hoping we can have a couple upset games coming up here.
Yeah. Get some a nice week of practice in, reset. I think a couple teams, that's the crazy part. We kind of had our set teams that we had expectations of. It's just going to be interesting to see if the letdown, then they kind of bounce back and there's a come up, or, you know what I mean? Because the next loss is over. And then it's like, what was that whole season for? Was to be knocked out first, second, or third. Like there's just, all the cards are down. Let's just say that. And it's do or die. So it'll be interesting to see.
It sure will.
All right, so let's jump into a quick overtime. We're just going to highlight some in the news. We've talked a little bit about Unrivaled, the women's WNBA-ish 3-on-3 new league. They are now in the playoffs, Sid, with the first ever Unrivaled champion will be named on Monday. So these playoff games are Sunday and Monday, March 16th and 17th. The Lunar Owls will play the Vinyl, and then the Rose will play the Laces, and then championship game will be the next day. I do want to point out, none of the teams that Sid and I picked originally are even a contender or made the playoffs, and the Lunar Owls are absolutely destroying everybody. I think they have like 1, maybe 2 losses the whole time. So they are the favorites. They should win it. Nafisa Collier, who is one of the main league Unrivaled founders, is on that team. So is Skylar Diggins. So it definitely should be interesting to watch and just kind of see how that all wraps up and kind of springs them into the WNBA season.
Should be exciting. I'm excited to tuning into that. That's been really fun. It's like a sprinkle on the top of watching a lot of college ball, having that Unrivaled league out there. It's been pretty cool.
Yeah. Now that there's no games this weekend, this will be a nice Sunday, Monday to get your basketball fix, and then you can watch some of the brackets as well.
All right, our next thing for in the news is all about Caitlin Clark. I think we've had her
back.
We've had her in the news section here at least 4 or 5 times probably throughout the season.
How can you not?
She's just Caitlin Clark. So she has a Netflix documentary that's premiering on June 30th of this year. So tune into that. I bet you that's going to be fun. I think it's supposed to walk through more of her life and how she worked on her game and became who she was. I think that's going to be super cool to see her in the Netflix documentary that's coming up there. So shout out Caitlin Clark.
Yeah, we'll be tuning in. I also hope a lot of girls that are learning the game or playing it currently, I'd say, I mean, anybody can watch it, right? But really those like middle school, high school girls, tune in, watch this, and just maybe get a snippet of an understanding of the work ethic and what it takes to get to the next level. And obviously, Caitlin Clark is one of one, but if you can kind of learn some habits from her, it really can take your game to the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. She's somebody that you can tell just works on her game effortlessly, tirelessly, like she's just built for it, but like puts the work in, right? I mean, that's a huge thing.
Did you see that one press conference she did? It was like her and Aaliyah Boston. And they're like, don't you ever get tired? You're just like being chased around the court the whole time. She's like, no, I sprint. And then Aaliyah Boston's like, she sprints everywhere. She's like, I sprint to the bathroom. I sprint to the shower. I sprint everywhere. And she just keeps saying it. But she's like, you know, she has like a personality to her and she's being funny. But it's also like, I don't know how you're not tired because she just runs all the time. She sprints.
There she is. Sprinting Caitlin Clark. There it is. All right. So we're going to jump to the last thing in the news here. And this one's kind of a fun one. And it's coming to a head now that the NCAA tournament is upon us. So women's college basketball teams are going to be paid for their wins at March Madness. So the NCAA members vote unanimously to pay out an initial $15 million to colleges competing in the Women's National Championship March Madness games. Before I dig into the details here, Becca, what are your initial thoughts there?
I'm a little salty. I think there's a way to do this that makes sense. And I'm not saying they shouldn't get paid. I think the whole NIL thing has gone kind of wild. There's no structure around it. There's no rules. It's just like a free for all. And I think they really need to get this right or else it's just going to set the precedent. And we've talked about this before. We've had other topics where tournaments are now saying, if you come to our Thanksgiving holiday tournament, we'll give your team $1 million to split. Like that's crazy to me to think about just because these are student athletes, which I think a lot of times get overlooked. I'm not saying they shouldn't make their money. I'm not saying there shouldn't be a reason and a rhyme and a method and a percentage to it. I don't know what that is. I can't solve that. I would never try. But I just think it's setting the precedent for when these girls are done with basketball. You and I, we get done with basketball at one point. It doesn't go forever. The WNBA is a small percentage. Overseas is different. There's more of a pool, but it's different. I'm just going to continue to say that. You're not making this type of money. So you have to hope your NIL deals come with you and you can continue to make money off that, but you're not going to be able to make the playoffs in the WNBA and get thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars each. So I just think it's a bit unrealistic at this point in time that the college game is so much farther ahead of like a professional league such as the WNBA that has been around for a while. And I know there's so many things we could say about the WNBA not really being at that level yet. I just think this is kind of crazy.
It is kind of crazy. I think back if, let's say, combined, Becca, you made $250K from playing in March Madness games. Your 4 years you were there, which might be conservative because you guys went deep, right? You played in a national championship. You guys had good years. So if you would have invested that $250K, think about now what that would have been worth to you. Like, I think it's smart, to your point, like some of these players are going to make a lot of money here in college playing ball. And then maybe they have a year or two where they do well and make some money out of college, but majority of these players don't, right? Like there is a small percentage that, especially the WNBA, because there's only a certain number of spots and that's going to get better as more teams join, but they should invest this money. Like, yeah, you should try to be conservative with it. And most people will probably not, but like, right. I just think about like, if we couldn't even have touched that money until now, man,
Yeah.
that thing would have compounded.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
1,000% agree with that. And then if that's the case and the NCAA wants to open this floodgates, and if I was in college and I heard somebody saying this, I'd be like, why would she say that? But being an adult, I can see now the value that this would be. If teams are making money and they're getting a percentage, whether it's held at the end or not, there should be a mandatory summer school class that you have to take on money management.
Yeah.
Portfolio stocks, like that would be, I wish I would have taken that myself in general. I just think that's something that should be mandated by the NCAA, so you're not getting everybody just, buying a Porsche because it's cool, right? Let's have that knowledge of where it goes, what it's used for, and how to grow it, because that would set all these kids up for success in the way I think this money ultimately should have been used for in the beginning.
Right. What an opportunity for a financial advisor to be like, yeah, I'm a financial advisor and some of my clients are the Notre Dame or Tennessee women's basketball team.
Yeah.
So cool. Let me get into a couple more of the details here and then we can wrap it up. So the NCAA voted to pay out teams in units, which are multi-million-dollar payments based on the number of games a team plays in the competition. So obviously, the further you advance, the more games you win, the more money you're going to make, which I think is fair, right? So that's a big thing there. The structure will be similar to the plan used in the men's basketball tournament. So the creation of units comes a year after the NCAA signed an 8-year deal with ESPN worth $920 million for the rights to more than 40 college sports championships. The deal includes the women's basketball championship, which was valued at $65 million per year. So the payments will be distributed first in 2026. So the players this year playing aren't going to get paid right until 2026 is when this is going to take effect. So that will account for this year's tournament results. A total of $15 million will be allocated to teams from the overall fund, which amounts to 26% of the revenue from the sale of the NCAA women's basketball media rights. There it is on paper. These players are getting paid to win in the tournament now.
I'm just in shock. I'm in shock we're here I'm in shock we're here that we're going to pay teams and players for how far they get in a tournament when we really don't even have the reins on just overall basic NIL sponsorship.
It's crazy
money. I'm just going to add one more thing that pretty much relates to this. Rick Pitino, amazing coach at Louisville. Now he's at St. John's. Doing well. Really well at turning that program around. Do you know what he said? He said, I'm not even recruiting high school kids anymore. I'm going straight to the transfer portal where I'm going to get experience, an understanding of what I want, how they play, who they are in college, and whatever NIL deals they already have, they can bring with them. So he's not even, because the high school recruiting has turned into such a circus and here, give me 1.5 million or I'm not coming. Like, that's crazy. You're a high schooler. Anyway, he's just completely changing his style of how he's even going to go about recruiting. And he'll just rebuild his team every year, he said, from the portal.
I kind of don't blame. I don't blame him. To your point, high school recruiting is insane. So like, you can kind of handpick players that have already been playing at the college level. You don't have to spin your wheels recruiting across the country, thousands of kids playing AAU and kids playing high school ball. Like, your pool also gets, you're spending less time recruiting.
Yeah.
Period.
The game has changed, Sid.
It's changed so much.
This is crazy.
It is
all great
great
opportunities. It just has to be funneled appropriately.
Yep. So $15 million in 2026 will get paid out, and then the fund will eventually increase further to $25 million by 2028, which is 41% of the media rights agreement. So these players will get paid for playing in the NCAA tournament, and that's some huge incentive to go after those seeds and to do well in the regular season also.
And do you remember when we talked about the coin flip for South Carolina and Texas? And it was like, can we have this on a merit that's something basketball related, wins, something, amount of points, margin, whatever. Now, if you start adding this in the beginning, maybe all these teams are going to start thinking every game actually matters for me to get a seed, for me to make a run at this tournament. I think it'll be super interesting to see what the actual cash payout is after that first year, because that's the least amount it will ever be. It's only going to increase from there.
Absolutely. Yeah. It is crazy. Good for all these players. That's what I say.
I agree.
Times have changed and there is a ton of money in this. $920 million for the rights is what ESPN is. That's what that's worth for that 8-year deal. I mean, the money's got to get paid out somewhere.
Just any college player listening to this, please take an online money management course. Take something so that you can better yourself. Basketball will stop at one point in your life. It happens. Just make sure you have yourself set, especially if you're making this much money.
Yeah, good for y'all.
Yeah, I'm jealous.
Well, let's wrap it up here, and we will come out with another episode next Friday. And at this point, we're going to know all about the tournament.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hit us up on our socials if you have any questions, concerns, anything you want us to answer. We'll be coming back to you soon with some bracketology from Sid and Becca. All right. I'll see you, Sid.
See you, Beck. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Talk to everyone soon.
That's the 28.5 final buzzer for today's episode. Don't forget to hit follow and download on your preferred podcast platform to catch every play-by-play. New episodes drop each week throughout the season.
If you've enjoyed our courtside chat, drop us a review or follow us on our social media accounts where you can send us questions that may be selected for our Team Huddle Q&A episodes. And remember, from females who have played the game, the size of the ball matters.